Ladies and gentlemen, if you are enjoying my videos, please click the like button. It is the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. I would be very grateful to you. As the fire dwindled, casting a dim glow on the surrounding darkness, the narrator found himself lost in thought. He wondered if people changed places or if places changed people. The flickering embers seemed like fragments of his own life, each spark a fleeting memory, slowly fading into the night. The pain in his hand was sharp and insistent, a constant reminder of his injury. He looked down at the wound, now throbbing dully, and was suddenly overwhelmed by a wave of nostalgia. He remembered his mother's words from long ago, a comforting whisper that had stayed with him through the years in the afterlife. There is no pain. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, soothing and gentle. He could almost feel her presence beside him, as if she were watching over him from wherever she was now. The thought brought a bittersweet smile to his face. He missed her dearly, missed her warmth and her wisdom. She had always known how to make sense of the world, even when it seemed to be falling apart. The narrator considered the changes he had undergone over the years. Had he altered the places he had visited, or had they transformed him? Each location held memories, both joyful and sorrowful, shaping the person he had become. He thought about the times he had felt lost and out of place, and how certain locations had provided solace and a sense of belonging. He remembered the vibrant city where he had spent his youth, full of promise and excitement. The bustling streets and towering buildings had seemed alive, pulsating with energy. He had been a part of that rhythm, his own ambitions intertwined with the city's relentless pace. But as time passed, the city changed, and so did he. It became less of a playground and more of a maze, its once familiar streets now foreign and cold. Had he outgrown the city, or had it moved on without him? Then there were the serene landscapes of his travels, places that offered peace and reflection. The mountains, with their silent majesty, had always called to him. Standing at their peaks, he felt a connection to something greater, a timeless force that dwarfed his worries. These places seemed to understand him, offering clarity when his mind was clouded with doubt. As he stared into the dying fire, he realized that it wasn't just the places themselves that held power, but the experiences he had within them. The people he met, the challenges he faced, and the moments of introspection all left their mark. In some ways, he had changed every place he had been to, leaving behind pieces of his soul. Yet, in every instance, the places had changed him more profoundly, shaping his perceptions and his spirit. The pain in his hand brought him back to the present. He winced, remembering the circumstances that led to his injury. It was a physical reminder of his journey, a testament to his resilience. He found a strange comfort in the ache, as if it grounded him in reality, tethering him to the here and now. His mother's words lingered in his mind, a gentle reminder of the inevitable. The idea of a painless afterlife was tempting, a place free from the burdens of the mortal world. But as he sat by the fading fire, he knew that pain was a part of life, as much as joy and love. It was through pain that he had grown, learned, and evolved. In the quiet of the night, with only the crackling embers for company, the narrator embraced his reflections. He understood that both he and the places he had been were inextricably linked, each shaping the other in countless ways. The journey was not just about the destinations, but the transformations along the way. As the last ember flickered out, he felt a sense of peace, knowing that change was the essence of life, and in that constant flux, he found his true self. There were 4 of us: Grisha, Katya, Yulia, and myself. Our adventure began with a shared fascination for the mysterious and the unexplained, a passion particularly kindled by Grisha, who had an insatiable curiosity for paranormal phenomena. It was this curiosity that led us to the Devil's Rock, a remote mountain shrouded in legend and intrigue. Grisha was the driving force behind our expedition. With his extensive collection of books on the supernatural and his endless supply of ghost stories, he had managed to pique our interest in the unknown. He was convinced that the Devil's Rock held secrets waiting to be uncovered, tales of strange occurrences and eerie encounters that beckoned to be explored. His enthusiasm was infectious, and soon we all found ourselves drawn into the plan. Katya, with her practical mindset and adventurous spirit, was our organizer. She made sure we had everything we needed for the journey, from maps and compasses to food supplies and first aid kits. Her determination and meticulous planning were the backbone of our trip, ensuring that we were prepared for any challenge we might face. Yulia, on the other hand, was the heart of our group. Her infectious laughter and unwavering optimism kept our spirits high, even when the going got tough. She was the one who could always find a silver lining, no matter how dark the clouds seemed. Her presence was a constant reminder that, despite the unknown dangers that lay ahead, we were in this together as friends. And then there was me, the narrator of our tale. I suppose I was the observer, the one who took in every detail, every nuance of our adventure. My role was to document our journey, to capture the essence of our experiences and the subtle shifts in our dynamics as we ventured into the unknown. The day of our departure was filled with excitement and a hint of apprehension. We packed our backpacks, double-checked our equipment, and set out early in the morning, eager to reach the base of the Devil's Rock before nightfall. The drive was long but filled with lively conversation and laughter, our anticipation growing with each passing mile. As we approached the mountain, its ominous silhouette loomed against the evening sky. The closer we got, the more palpable the sense of mystery became. Local legends spoke of strange lights and ghostly apparitions, of hikers who had ventured too close to the edge and never returned. Grisha, ever the enthusiast, recounted these stories with a gleam in his eye, fueling our curiosity and a slight undercurrent of fear. We set up camp at the base of the mountain, a safe distance from the notorious cliffs where the most inexplicable phenomena were said to occur. The air was crisp, and the sky above us was a tapestry of stars, undisturbed by city lights. As we gathered around the campfire, Grisha pulled out a worn notebook, filled with his research on the mountain's eerie history. 10 years ago, he began, his voice low and dramatic. A group of 6 people came here, just like us. They were never seen again. Some say they jumped off the cliff in a mass suicide. Others believe they encountered something otherworldly. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, the only sound was the crackling of the fire. We exchanged glances, each of us processing the gravity of what we were about to undertake. Despite the chill running down our spines, there was an unspoken agreement we had to know the truth. The following morning, we began our ascent. The trail was narrow and treacherous, lined with gnarled roots and low-hanging branches that seemed determined to trip us up. I took the lead, navigating with the help of a map and compass, while Grisha brought up the rear, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of the paranormal. As we climbed higher, the path grew steeper and more rugged, demanding our full attention and effort. Katya's meticulous preparation paid off, as we relied on her packed provisions and climbing gear to make the journey manageable. Yulia's cheerful encouragement spurred us on, her laughter echoing through the trees and lifting our spirits. After several grueling hours, we finally reached the summit. The view was breathtaking, a sweeping panorama of the landscape below, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. But it wasn't the view that held our attention, it was the palpable sense of history, of something lingering just beyond the edge of perception. We set up our camp on the summit, careful to avoid the cliffs. As night fell, we gathered around the fire once more, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows. Grisha continued his tales, weaving a tapestry of horror and fascination that held us spellbound. The stories of the 6 who vanished here, of their last known movements, and the chilling evidence left behind, seemed to come alive in the darkness. The night was long, filled with whispers of the past and the occasional unexplained sound from the depths of the forest. Despite our bravado, there was an underlying tension, a sense that we were not alone. Each creak of a branch, each rustle of leaves, seemed to hold a hidden meaning, a secret waiting to be uncovered. As the hours wore on, fatigue began to set in. One by one, we retreated to our tents, though sleep did not come easily. I lay awake, staring at the canvas above me, my mind racing with thoughts of the unknown. The mountain, with its silent witness to so many mysteries, seemed to breathe around us, a living entity with secrets of its own. In that moment, I understood why we had come. It wasn't just the thrill of the paranormal or the allure of the unknown, it was the journey itself, the bond we shared, and the stories we would carry with us forever. Whatever the Devil's Rock had in store for us, we were ready to face it together, as friends united by a shared sense of wonder and adventure. Our adventure to Devil's Rock was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a meticulously planned endeavor, undertaken with careful consideration of every detail. We wanted to ensure that we were prepared for any eventuality, so we spent weeks gathering supplies, studying maps, and checking weather forecasts to pick the perfect weekend for our hike. Grisha, with his encyclopedic knowledge of the supernatural and his passion for the paranormal, took charge of the research. He scoured books and online forums, collecting every snippet of information he could find about Devil's Rock. Katya, our practical and resourceful planner, compiled a list of essential gear and provisions. She made sure we had everything we needed for a 2-day trip, from sturdy hiking boots and rain gear to first aid supplies and plenty of food. Yulia, our ray of sunshine, brought her contagious enthusiasm and energy. She helped us pack and made sure we didn't forget the little things that could make the trip more enjoyable, like extra batteries for our flashlights and a deck of cards for evening entertainment. As for me, I was the designated chronicler, ready to document our journey and capture the moments that would become cherished memories. The night before our departure, we gathered at Katya's apartment to finalize our plans. The living room was filled with the hum of excitement and the rustle of packing. Backpacks were loaded with carefully chosen items, and Grisha double-checked his notes, making sure we had all the information we needed about the mountain's legends and possible hazards. "Looks like the weather's going to be perfect," Katya said, glancing up from her phone with a satisfied smile. "Clear skies and mild temperatures all weekend." "That's a relief," I replied, zipping up my pack. "The last thing we need is to get caught in a storm up there." Just as we were about to call it a night, Grisha's phone buzzed with a message. He read it quickly and then looked up at us with a mischievous grin. "Guys, I've got an idea," he said. "How about we invite Yulia's friend Anna to join us? She's been wanting to go on a hike, and it might be fun to have another person along." Yulia's eyes lit up. "That's a great idea. Anna's been talking about wanting to do something adventurous. She'll love it." Katya nodded thoughtfully. More company would be nice, and it's always good to have an extra pair of hands. I agreed, though part of me felt a slight twinge of apprehension. I didn't know Anna well, but Yulia's excitement was infectious, and I trusted her judgment. We quickly sent Anna an invitation, and she responded almost immediately with an enthusiastic yes. With our group now complete, we turned in for the night, eager for the journey ahead. The next morning we met at the edge of town, our backpacks loaded and spirits high. Anna joined us, her face lit with excitement and curiosity. We made quick introductions, and soon it felt as if she had always been part of our group. The drive to the base of Devil's Rock took about 5 hours. The road wound through picturesque countryside, gradually giving way to more rugged terrain as we neared our destination. We chatted and laughed, the miles slipping away as we shared stories and speculated about what awaited us at the mountain. As we approached the mountain, its imposing silhouette loomed against the sky, a jagged outline that seemed both inviting and forbidding. We parked the car at a small clearing near the trailhead and took a moment to stretch and gather our thoughts. The air was fresh and cool, filled with the scent of pine and the distant sound of running water. "All right, everyone ready?" Katya asked, securing her backpack and adjusting her hiking poles. We nodded in unison, each of us feeling a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Grisha led the way, his eyes bright with curiosity, while Yulia and Anna followed, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves underfoot. I brought up the rear, already framing the first lines of the story I would write about our journey. The trail began gently, winding through a dense forest that gradually thinned as we climbed higher. The path was well-trodden but challenging, with roots and rocks that demanded our attention and respect. We moved steadily, finding a rhythm in our steps and pausing occasionally to take in the stunning vistas that opened up as we ascended. The further we climbed, the more the landscape transformed. The trees gave way to rocky outcrops and patches of wildflowers, and the air grew cooler and crisper. Every now and then, we caught glimpses of the summit, its craggy peaks promising both a challenge and a reward. Despite the physical exertion, our spirits remained high. We talked and joked, shared stories and snacks, and encouraged each other whenever the trail became particularly steep or difficult. Anna proved to be a delightful addition to our group, her enthusiasm and curiosity matching our own. After several hours of hiking, we finally reached a plateau where we decided to set up camp. The view was breathtaking, a sweeping panorama of rolling hills and distant valleys, all bathed in the warm light of the setting sun. We worked together to pitch our tents and build a fire, our movements efficient and synchronized after a long day of shared effort. As darkness fell, we gathered around the fire, its flickering flames casting a warm glow over our tired but happy faces. Grisha, ever the storyteller, began to recount the legends of Devil's Rock, his voice low and captivating. The night air was filled with the sounds of the forest, a symphony of nature that seemed to echo the tales of mystery and wonder. We sat there, united by our shared adventure and the bond of friendship that had only grown stronger throughout the day. The journey had just begun, and as we gazed up at the star-filled sky, we knew that whatever lay ahead, we were ready to face it together. The ascent began with a sense of anticipation and excitement, each step bringing us closer to the summit of Devil's Rock. The trail ahead was narrow and winding, flanked by towering trees that seemed to lean inwards, as if conspiring to block our path. I took the lead, navigating the way with a combination of intuition and the occasional glance at the map on my phone. The forest was dense, the air heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. Every now and then, a shaft of sunlight pierced the canopy above, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. As we climbed higher, the trail became increasingly challenging, strewn with obstacles in the form of gnarled roots and low-hanging branches. I forged ahead, pushing through the dense undergrowth and swatting away spiderwebs that seemed determined to ensnare us. Behind me, I could hear the occasional curse or gasp as my friends encountered yet another obstacle in their path. Grisha, always the optimist, offered words of encouragement, urging us to keep going despite the growing difficulty of the terrain. "We're almost there," he called out, his voice echoing through the trees. "Just a little further." But the trail seemed to have other ideas. With each passing minute, it grew steeper and more treacherous, until it seemed to disappear entirely into a tangle of underbrush and fallen logs. I paused, studying the map on my phone and trying to make sense of our surroundings. "Looks like we might have taken a wrong turn," I admitted, feeling a pang of frustration. "We'll need to backtrack and find another way up." Grisha nodded in agreement, his brow furrowed with concern. "Maybe we should take a break," he suggested. "Catch our breath and regroup before we continue." But the girls, spooked by Grisha's earlier warnings about predators lurking in the forest, were eager to press on without stopping. They exchanged nervous glances, their eyes darting from shadow to shadow as if expecting something to leap out at them from the darkness. "We need to keep moving," Katya insisted, her voice tinged with urgency. "The sooner we reach the summit, the sooner we'll be safe." Reluctantly, we resumed our climb, the tension in the air palpable as we picked our way through the dense undergrowth. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig set our nerves on edge, our imaginations running wild with visions of unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. But despite our fears, we pressed on, driven by a combination of determination and the promise of adventure that lay ahead. The summit was within reach, and nothing, not even the dark and forbidding forest that surrounded us, could stand in our way. After an arduous ascent lasting nearly an hour and a half, we finally reached the summit, greeted by a breathtaking panorama that stretched out before us. The view from Devil's Rock was nothing short of spectacular, with rolling hills and dense forests unfolding in every direction beneath a vast expanse of open sky. As we caught our breath and took in the awe-inspiring scenery, my mind couldn't help but wander to the dark history that shrouded this remote mountaintop. It was a story that had intrigued Grisha from the moment he first heard of it, a tale of tragedy and despair that had unfolded here a decade earlier. I recalled the chilling details: a group of 6 individuals, drawn together by a shared sense of despair and desperation, had come to Devil's Rock seeking solace and sanctuary from their troubles. But instead of finding peace, they had found only more pain and suffering, culminating in a collective act of self-destruction that had shocked the entire region. The memory sent a shiver down my spine as I looked out over the precipice, imagining the sheer terror and hopelessness that must have driven those poor souls to take such drastic action. What demons had haunted them in their final moments? What unspeakable horrors had driven them to make that fateful leap into the abyss below? For Grisha, the grim history of Devil's Rock held a morbid fascination, a reminder of the fragility of the human psyche and the depths of despair to which it could descend. It was this macabre allure that had drawn him to this remote corner of the world, eager to explore the mysteries that lay hidden within its haunted depths. As I stood there on the summit, surrounded by the beauty of the natural world, yet keenly aware of the darkness that lurked beneath its surface, I couldn't help but wonder what secrets Devil's Rock still held, and whether, in our quest for adventure and excitement, we too might become ensnared in its tragic history. With the summit conquered and the panoramic view spreading out beneath us, our group wasted no time in setting up camp. We chose a sheltered spot, protected from the wind by a cluster of stunted pines, and quickly got to work erecting our tents and gathering firewood. As the tents took shape and the campsite came together, a sense of camaraderie filled the air, a shared purpose, and a shared sense of accomplishment binding us together in the wilderness. With the tents pitched and the campfire crackling merrily, we set about preparing our evening meal. The girls took charge of cooking duties, expertly whipping up a steaming pot of pilaf over the open flames while the men explored the surrounding area, eager to stretch their legs after the long climb. We wandered along the edge of the summit, marveling at the rugged beauty of the landscape and the sheer drop-offs that loomed on every side. For a moment, it felt as though we had stepped back in time, escaping the hustle and bustle of modern life to immerse ourselves in the simplicity and serenity of the natural world. The absence of cell phones and emails was a welcome relief, replaced by the soothing sounds of the wind rustling through the trees and the crackle of the campfire as it danced in the darkness. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a fiery shade of orange, we gathered around the campfire to share stories and laughter, savoring the warmth of the flames against the encroaching chill of the night. It was a moment of pure bliss, a fleeting glimpse of paradise amidst the rugged beauty of Devil's Rock. As the flames of the campfire flickered and danced, casting eerie shadows against the surrounding trees, Grisha broached the subject of the narrator's sleepwalking episodes. He suggested caution, hinting at the possibility of recurrence, but the narrator reassured him that the issue had long been resolved, a relic of the past, best left undisturbed. Gathered in the flickering glow of the fire, Grisha regaled us with tales of the mountain's dark history, weaving a tapestry of fear and fascination with his words. He spoke of ancient legends that whispered of malevolent spirits haunting Devil's Rock, and of the tragic events that had unfolded on its slopes a decade prior. With each story, the atmosphere grew heavier, weighted down by the weight of centuries-old superstitions and the lingering specter of death. Grisha's words painted vivid pictures of a world where reality and myth blurred together, where the line between the living and the dead grew thin in the shadows of the night. The girls listened with rapt attention, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination, while the men exchanged knowing glances, silently acknowledging the power of storytelling to both thrill and terrify. In that moment, gathered together beneath the starlit sky, we felt the weight of history pressing down upon us, binding us to this place and its secrets. As the last embers of the fire died away and the darkness closed in around us, we huddled closer together, seeking solace in the warmth of companionship and the shared comfort of human presence. And as the night deepened and the wind whispered through the trees, we found ourselves drawn deeper into the mysteries of Devil's Rock, our imaginations running wild with tales of ancient curses and restless spirits. As Grisha delved into the grim history of Devil's Rock, his words hung heavy in the air, weaving a chilling narrative of despair and tragedy. He recounted the harrowing tale of 6 souls who had met their end by leaping from the cliffs, their desperate cries echoing through the night as they plummeted into the abyss below. With each word, a shiver ran down the spines of the listeners, and unease settled like a thick fog over the campsite. The girls exchanged nervous glances, their expressions etched with concern, while the men's faces betrayed a mixture of fascination and apprehension. Sensing the growing tension, the narrator sought respite from the haunting tales and made his way to the edge of the precipice. There, beneath the vast expanse of the star-strewn sky, he hoped to find solace in the gentle embrace of the night and the soothing whispers of the wind. As he stood on the edge, gazing out into the darkness below, A sense of unease washed over him, mingling with the cold tendrils of fear that crept up his spine. And yet, despite the chilling tales and the weight of the past that hung heavy in the air, there was a strange beauty to be found in the silence of the night, a beauty that whispered of secrets yet to be uncovered and mysteries waiting to be revealed. As the night draped its inky veil over the rugged landscape, the narrator found himself drawn to the edge of the precipice once more, seeking solace in the solitude that the darkness offered. The crackling embers of the dying fire cast eerie shadows, dancing in the flickering light as if performing a silent, hypnotic dance. Amidst the tranquil stillness of the night, a sense of unease gnawed at the edges of the narrator's consciousness, heightened by the unsettling tales that still lingered in his mind. His gaze swept over the shadowy expanse of the forest below, probing the darkness for any sign of movement or disturbance. A fleeting shadow darted through the trees, a mere whisper of movement in the velvet embrace of the night. Instinctively, the narrator's senses sharpened, his heart quickening with a sudden surge of adrenaline. Yet, try as he might, he could not discern the source of the mysterious presence lurking in the depths of the woods. Shaking off the tendrils of apprehension that threatened to ensnare him, the narrator reluctantly tore his gaze away from the forest and made his way back to the warmth of the campfire and the reassuring presence of his friends. As the night wore on, the camp gradually succumbed to the embrace of sleep, the rhythmic rise and fall of their breaths, a soothing lullaby against the backdrop of the wilderness. Despite the attempts of one of the girls to foster intimacy, the narrator found himself slipping effortlessly into the embrace of sleep, his mind drifting into the realm of dreams, where reality and illusion intertwined in a delicate dance. The narrator stirred from the embrace of slumber as the first tendrils of dawn began to weave their way through the fabric of night. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he scanned the campsite and froze in disbelief at the sight before him. There, at the precipice's edge, stood Grisha, his silhouette etched against the backdrop of the slowly awakening world. His voice, tinged with an eerie sense of detachment, carried on the early morning breeze as he spoke of freedom, a freedom that seemed to beckon him irresistibly forward. In a heart-stopping moment, Grisha took a single, fateful step into the yawning abyss, vanishing into the depths of darkness below. The narrator's mind reeled with shock and disbelief, struggling to comprehend the incomprehensible act unfolding before him. As if in response to the unsettling spectacle, the bonfire erupted into a sudden, brilliant blaze, casting a stark contrast against the fading shadows of night. The flames danced and flickered with an otherworldly intensity, bathing the campsite in an eerie, hypnotic glow. A shiver of unease coursed through the narrator's veins as he watched the mesmerizing display, the line between reality and illusion blurring in the flickering firelight. The inexplicable anomaly only served to deepen the sense of foreboding that hung heavy in the air, casting a pall of uncertainty over the once tranquil wilderness. With a heavy heart and a mind teeming with unanswered questions, the narrator could only watch in silent disbelief as the flames danced on, casting their eerie light upon the unfolding mysteries of the night. As the first light of dawn painted the horizon in soft hues of gold and rose, the narrator's senses were suddenly jolted awake by a chilling sight amidst the tranquil embrace of the forest. There, amidst the shifting shadows of the trees, a silhouette emerged, humanoid in form yet twisted and distorted, adorned with a tail that curled sinuously behind it and horns that pierced the veil of darkness like jagged spears. The mere sight of this enigmatic figure sent a shiver down the narrator's spine, his pulse quickening with a mixture of fear and intrigue. As the mysterious silhouette drew nearer, an overwhelming wave of nausea and disorientation washed over the narrator, his head throbbing with a migraine so intense it threatened to engulf him entirely. Desperately, he clung to consciousness, his mind reeling with unanswered questions and primal instincts urging him to flee. And then, in a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the shadowy figure began to disintegrate before his very eyes, crumbling into a swirling cloud of dust that danced upon the morning breeze like spectral wisps of smoke. With each passing second, the pain that had gripped the narrator's mind began to dissipate, melting away like frost beneath the warmth of the rising sun. With a gasp, the narrator jolted awake, his body drenched in a cold sheen of sweat, as he struggled to make sense of the surreal encounter that had unfolded within the depths of his subconscious mind. The memory of the encounter lingered like a haunting echo, leaving him to wonder if it had been nothing more than a fevered dream or a portent of darker forces at play in the wilderness beyond. As the morning light filtered through the dense canopy overhead, casting dappled shadows upon the forest floor, the narrator's heart quickened with a sense of unease as he realized that Grisha was nowhere to be found. Frantically retracing the events of the previous evening, the narrator struggled to recall whether Grisha had retired to rest alongside the others or if he had vanished into the darkness without a word. At first, a flicker of hope ignited within him, suggesting that perhaps Grisha had simply ventured into the woods in search of mushrooms or firewood, his absence nothing more than a fleeting errand in the early hours of dawn. Yet, as the moments stretched into minutes and Grisha failed to return, a gnawing sense of apprehension began to take hold of the narrator's thoughts, casting doubt upon the safety of his friend. The memory of the dream, in which Grisha had willingly taken a leap into the abyss, lingered in the recesses of the narrator's mind like a sinister omen, fueling his growing anxiety with each passing heartbeat. With each rustle of leaves and distant call of wildlife, the forest seemed to whisper secrets of unseen dangers lurking just beyond the edge of perception, leaving the narrator to ponder the fate of his friend in the shadowy embrace of the wilderness. With a sense of urgency driving him forward, the narrator combed through the surrounding area, his footsteps quickening with each passing moment as he neared the precipice of the cliff, hoping to catch a glimpse of his missing friend below. Yet, as he peered over the edge, all he saw was the yawning abyss staring back at him, offering no answers to the mystery that had unfolded during the night. Memories of a newspaper article detailing the tragic history of mass suicides at Devil's Rock flooded the narrator's mind, amplifying his growing unease with each passing second. The weight of concern pressed upon his chest like a leaden burden, urging him to action as he raced through the wilderness in search of his friend. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs beneath his feet seemed to echo with the possibility of danger, each shadow cast by the trees a silent sentinel guarding the secrets of the forest. Despite his efforts, Grisha remained elusive, his absence a haunting presence that lingered at the edge of the narrator's consciousness, refusing to be ignored. As the minutes stretched into hours and the sun climbed higher in the sky, the narrator's desperation grew, his search becoming more frantic with each passing moment. Yet, despite his best efforts, Grisha remained nowhere to be found, leaving the narrator to grapple with the chilling possibility that his friend had become yet another victim of the mountain's dark and sinister history. As the first light of dawn filtered through the canopy above, the narrator faced the daunting task of reassuring the girls without inciting panic. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with worry, he concocted a gentle lie, telling them that Grisha had ventured back to the car to retrieve a forgotten charger, a small white lie meant to stave off the rising tide of fear threatening to overwhelm them. Hoping against hope that his friend would return before the facade crumbled, the narrator did his best to maintain a facade of composure, his words carefully chosen to convey a sense of calm assurance. Yet beneath his reassuring facade, the weight of uncertainty pressed down upon him like a leaden cloak, each passing moment stretching out into an eternity of unanswered questions. As the morning wore on and hunger gnawed at their stomachs, the girls hesitantly set about preparing breakfast, their movements slow and uncertain in the absence of their friend. Yet, when the time came to eat, they found themselves unable to take a single bite without Grisha's presence, their worry and anxiety casting a shadow over the meal. With steely determination, the narrator and the girls joined forces, scouring the surrounding area in search of their missing companion, their footsteps echoing through the silent forest as they called out his name in vain. Yet, despite their best efforts, Grisha remained nowhere to be found, leaving them to grapple with the unsettling possibility that something sinister lurked amidst the trees, waiting to claim its next victim. Descending to the car in a state of weary apprehension, the narrator's heart sank as he found no sign of Grisha amidst the silent shadows cast by the surrounding trees. His futile search left him dirtied and exhausted, a tangible testament to the mounting anxiety that gripped his soul like a vice. Returning to the campsite, he was met with the palpable panic of the girls, their wide-eyed expressions reflecting the depths of their fear. In their desperation to flee the encroaching darkness, they pleaded with him to abandon their makeshift refuge and seek safety elsewhere. Yet, despite their frantic entreaties, the narrator found himself unable to concede defeat, his steadfast determination rooted in the slim hope that Grisha would return before the night's end. With a heavy heart and a sense of resignation weighing heavily upon his shoulders, he implored the girls to remain by his side until dawn, their collective strength bolstered by the faint glimmer of hope that flickered within their hearts. To ease the burden of their anxiety, they turned to the solace of vodka, its fiery warmth offering a brief respite from the chill of the night. As the flickering flames of their dwindling campfire cast dancing shadows upon the forest floor, the girls nestled into their makeshift beds, their weary bodies succumbing to the embrace of sleep. Left alone with his thoughts, the narrator found himself consumed by a maelstrom of emotions, each passing moment stretching out into an agonizing eternity of uncertainty and dread. Through the long watches of the night, he remained vigilant, his senses attuned to the slightest sound or movement in the surrounding darkness. Yet, despite his tireless vigilance, the night remained shrouded in silence, its secrets hidden beneath a veil of impenetrable darkness. And so, with each passing hour, the tension mounted, casting a long shadow over their fragile hopes and shattered dreams. As the night wore on, the narrator found himself ensnared in a web of fitful slumber, his restless dreams haunted by the specter of uncertainty that loomed over their secluded campsite. Each time he stirred from his uneasy sleep, he was greeted by the sensation of hot breath tickling his ear, a phantom presence that seemed to linger just beyond the reach of his waking senses. Desperate to find solace in the embrace of sleep, he attempted to quell the rising tide of fear that threatened to consume him, his thoughts consumed by the lingering hope of Grisha's return. Yet, with each fleeting moment of respite, he was abruptly jolted awake by the sound of strange, guttural hissing emanating from the darkness beyond the confines of their tent. With a heart heavy with dread, the narrator strained to discern the source of the ominous sound, his senses heightened to the point of hyper-awareness in the oppressive stillness of the night. Each rustle of the wind through the branches above and every whisper of movement in the underbrush below served only to deepen the sense of unease that hung heavy in the air, casting a pall over their isolated encampment. Though he longed to attribute the unsettling noises to the benign machinations of the natural world, a creeping sense of foreboding gnawed at the edges of his consciousness, its icy tendrils tightening their grip with each passing moment. And so, as the night wore on, the narrator found himself ensnared in a nightmarish cycle of restless sleep and fitful awakenings, his dreams haunted by the echoing refrain of uncertainty that echoed through the darkness. In the depths of his troubled sleep, the narrator found himself ensnared in a harrowing vision, a twisted tableau of horror that unfolded before his mind's eye with chilling clarity. In this spectral realm of distorted reality, he beheld the visage of Grisha, his dear friend, contorted in agony, his once noble countenance marred by the grotesque disfigurement of an unnaturally twisted neck and a gaping wound that oozed crimson streams of blood. With a sense of mounting dread, the narrator watched as Grisha beckoned to him and the others, his voice a haunting echo that reverberated through the darkness. Step by agonizing step, Grisha led them towards the precipice of the yawning abyss, his eyes pleading for aid even as his shattered form teetered on the brink of oblivion. In the grip of terror, the narrator was overcome by a primal instinct, a desperate impulse to sever the tether that bound them to this waking nightmare. With trembling hands and a heart heavy with grief, he pushed against the spectral form of his friend, the force of his actions propelling Grisha into the waiting maw of the gaping chasm below. As Grisha vanished into the yawning void, swallowed whole by the darkness that lay beyond, the narrator awoke with a start, his body drenched in a cold sweat, his mind reeling from the horrors that had unfolded in the realm of dreams. And yet, even as he struggled to shake off the lingering tendrils of sleep, he could not escape the chilling certainty that his visions held a kernel of truth, a grim portent of the fate that awaited them in the shadowed depths of the night. A shroud of unease enveloped the narrator as he emerged from the depths of his troubled slumber, his mind still reeling from the unsettling visions that had plagued his dreams. Yet, amidst the lingering tendrils of dread, a newfound resolve began to stir within him, a steely determination to confront the shadows that lurked in the recesses of the night. With a sense of grim certainty, the narrator turned to Yulia, his voice steady despite the turmoil that churned within his breast. "I know where Grisha is," he declared, his words ringing out into the stillness of the night like a clarion call to action. Motioning for Yulia to follow, he strode purposefully towards the precipice of the looming abyss, his every step a testament to the resolve that burned within him. Yulia, her features etched with a mixture of fear and uncertainty, reached out to grasp the narrator's hand, seeking solace in the warmth of his touch. But as their fingers intertwined, a searing pain shot through the narrator's veins, a visceral reminder of the darkness that threatened to consume them both. In a moment of chilling clarity, the narrator recoiled from Yulia's touch, his mind awash with a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. And as she teetered on the brink of the abyss, her desperate pleas for salvation echoing through the night, he made a fateful decision that would forever alter the course of their destinies. With a force born of desperation, the narrator pushed Yulia away from him, his actions guided by a primal instinct to preserve his own fragile grasp on reality. And as she plummeted into the yawning depths below, swallowed whole by the insatiable hunger of the abyss, the narrator stood frozen on the precipice, his soul weighed down by the crushing weight of guilt and remorse. In the silent aftermath of his actions, the narrator was left to grapple with the chilling realization that in his quest for answers, he had become the architect of his own undoing, consigning himself and those he held dear to a fate from which there could be no escape. As the echoes of Katya's piercing scream shattered the fragile tranquility of the night, the narrator was jolted awake from the depths of his troubled slumber, his senses reeling from the disorienting cacophony that surrounded him. With a start, he realized that Yulia was nowhere to be found, her absence casting a pall of foreboding over the desolate landscape. A shiver coursed through the narrator's frame as he struggled to reconcile the haunting specters of his dreams with the harsh light of reality, the lines between the two blurring with unsettling clarity. The events that had unfolded in the realm of slumber now seemed to bleed into the waking world, intertwining in a tangled web of uncertainty and fear. Clutching his throbbing hand, the narrator winced as the dull ache of the scratches inflicted by Yulia's desperate grasp served as a cruel reminder of the blurred boundaries between illusion and truth. Each jagged line etched into his flesh bore witness to the haunting echoes of a reality distorted by the whims of the subconscious mind. With a heavy heart weighed down by the burden of guilt and confusion, the narrator found himself ensnared in a waking nightmare from which there could be no escape. As the tendrils of doubt tightened their grip around his consciousness, he was left to navigate the treacherous labyrinth of his own fractured psyche, haunted by the specter of a truth too terrible to comprehend. Katya's voice, tinged with urgency and fear, cut through the stillness of the night like a blade, her words a stark reminder of the perilous predicament they found themselves in. As she pressed upon the necessity of abandoning their campsite without delay, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily upon the narrator's shoulders, a palpable sense of unease settling like a shroud over the desolate landscape. In the dim glow of the dying embers, the narrator grappled with the disorienting blur that seemed to blur the lines between nightmare and reality, the haunting echoes of his dreams still fresh in his mind. Yet, amidst the chaos of his thoughts, the searing pain radiating from his injured hand served as a cruel anchor to the tangible realm, a visceral reminder that the events unfolding around him were all too real. With a reluctant nod, the narrator acquiesced to Katya's plea, his resolve hardened by the biting sting of his wounds and the ominous shadows that danced upon the fringes of his consciousness. Though the path ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty, the necessity of action outweighed the paralyzing grip of fear, propelling them forward into the unknown depths of the night. Together they gathered their meager belongings, their movements quick and purposeful, driven by a primal instinct for survival. As they stole away from the campsite, the darkness of the forest enveloped them like a cloak, obscuring their path, yet offering a sliver of refuge from the encroaching terrors that lurked in the shadows. With each step, the distance between them and the haunting memories of the night grew ever wider, yet the specter of uncertainty lingered like a ghost upon the wind, whispering of dangers yet unseen and trials yet to come. And so, with hearts heavy with apprehension and minds braced for the unknown, they embarked upon their journey into the heart of darkness, their fates intertwined in the ever-shifting tapestry of the night. As the tendrils of consciousness began to weave their way back into the narrator's mind, he found himself suspended in the hazy limbo between dream and reality. Slowly, he blinked away the remnants of slumber, his gaze drifting downward to where his hand lay cradled in the dim light filtering through the tense fabric. With a sharp inhale, he recoiled at the sight of angry red scratches marring his skin, a stark testament to the harrowing events of the night before. A dull ache throbbed behind his temples, each beat of his heart echoing through his skull like a relentless drumbeat. Disorientation clouded his thoughts, casting a pall of uncertainty over his senses, as if the world around him were but a fragile mirage poised to shatter at the slightest touch. Beside him, Katya stirred, her voice a soft murmur in the stillness of the dawn-lit tent. Her eyes met his, wide with concern, and he felt the weight of her unwavering gaze settle upon him like a leaden cloak. In her eyes he glimpsed a glimmer of determination, a steely resolve tempered by the unyielding urgency of their situation. With a resigned sigh, the narrator acquiesced to Katya's insistence, his fingers trembling slightly as he fumbled to gather his belongings. Each movement felt disjointed, as if he were merely a spectator in his own body, a passive observer to the tumultuous whirlwind of emotions raging within. As they prepared to depart, Katya's words echoed in the recesses of his mind, a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. She spoke of hope and salvation, of a beacon of light amidst the encroaching darkness, her unwavering faith in their eventual deliverance a beacon of strength in the face of adversity. Together they emerged from the confines of the tent, their footsteps a solemn cadence against the backdrop of the waking world. The air hung heavy with the promise of change, a silent testament to the trials that lay ahead. And though the road before them remained uncertain, the bond that bound them together burned bright in the face of uncertainty, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching shadows of the unknown. As the tension between them reached its boiling point, Katya's patience wore thin, her voice tinged with frustration as she demanded they leave at once. But the narrator's resolve wavered, doubt creeping insidiously into the recesses of his mind like tendrils of ivy strangling the last vestiges of reason. A spark of defiance ignited within him, kindling the embers of his anger into a blazing inferno. How dare she question his judgment, his courage? With each accusatory word that fell from her lips, the flames of his fury burned brighter, until he could scarcely contain the tempest raging within. In a moment of reckless abandon, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear and indignation, he lashed out, his grip closing like a vice around her hair. The echo of her startled gasp reverberated through the air, drowned out by the roaring tumult of his own tumultuous emotions. For a fleeting instant, he reveled in the sweet taste of dominance, the heady rush of power coursing through his veins like liquid fire. But as the haze of anger began to dissipate, he was left with naught but the bitter taste of regret, a bitter pill to swallow amidst the wreckage of their fractured trust. In the aftermath of their confrontation, a heavy silence descended upon them, the weight of their unspoken words hanging palpably in the air. And though the narrator's heart ached with remorse, the damage had been done, the chasm between them widening with each passing moment. As the chaos of the night began to ebb away, leaving behind only the haunting echoes of their shattered reality, the narrator found himself adrift in a sea of introspection, grappling with the weight of his actions and the harrowing realization of his own culpability. Gazing into the flickering embers of the dwindling fire, he felt the tendrils of guilt coil around his heart like a vice, squeezing relentlessly until he could scarcely draw breath. In the stark illumination cast by the dying flames, he saw not only the faces of his friends, but the ghosts of his own sins, haunting him with their accusatory gaze. The mountainous terrain, once a source of wonder and adventure, now loomed menacingly over him, its craggy peaks serving as silent witnesses to the tragedy that had unfolded beneath their watchful gaze. He couldn't shake the gnawing suspicion that perhaps it wasn't the mountain or some insidious ailment that had clouded his judgment, but the darkness lurking within his own soul. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, he acknowledged the damning truth he was responsible for the deaths of his friends. The weight of that realization threatened to crush him beneath its crushing burden, leaving him gasping for air in a suffocating miasma of remorse and regret. Sitting alone by the smoldering remnants of their campfire, he grappled with the damning label that now clung to him like a shroud murderer. The word reverberated through his mind like a relentless refrain, echoing off the cavernous walls of his conscience, until it was all he could hear, all he could bear. In that moment of agonizing clarity, he knew that he could never escape the specter of his own guilt, nor could he outrun the shadows that haunted his every step. For he had become that which he feared most, a monster, lurking in the depths of his own soul, waiting to consume him whole. With trembling fingers and a heavy heart, the narrator resolved to pen his final words, a poignant testament to the tragedy that had unfolded in the shadow of the mountain. Each stroke of the pen felt like a dagger to his soul, carving out the painful truth that he could no longer bear to keep hidden. In the flickering glow of the dying fire, he poured out his heart onto the page, weaving together a tapestry of remorse and regret, sorrow and despair. His words were a lament for the lost souls who had once been his companions, now condemned to an eternity of silence beneath the cold earth. He spoke of the darkness that had consumed him, the insidious whispers that had led him astray, and the terrible price he had paid for his folly. He begged forgiveness from those he had wronged, knowing full well that absolution would never come. As he sealed the envelope and tucked it away in the inner pocket of his jacket, he felt a sense of grim satisfaction, knowing that his final message would not go unheard. It was a beacon of truth in a world shrouded in lies, a testament to the depths of his remorse and the sincerity of his repentance. With a heavy heart and a weary soul, he lay down to rest, knowing that his time in this world was drawing to a close. He prayed that his body would be found before the ravages of nature claimed it as their own, for he could not bear the thought of his remains being devoured by scavengers. And so, with one final act of defiance against the darkness that threatened to consume him, he surrendered himself to the mercy of fate, knowing that whatever lay beyond the veil of death, he would face it with courage and dignity, for he had nothing left to lose. The narrative shifts to a new tale of three adventurers embarking on a journey towards the fabled Tulaikai tunnels. Their path winds through the forest towards the summit of Stone Ridge, standing tall at an elevation of 776 meters. Yet, even before they begin their ascent, an ominous presence seems to shadow their every step, a lingering sensation of being watched that sends shivers down their spines. As they delve deeper into the dense woodland, the stories shared by Sergei about the vanished tourists weigh heavily on their minds. Whispers of mysterious disappearances and unexplained phenomena add an unsettling layer to their already daunting expedition. Despite the warnings, their curiosity drives them forward, eager to uncover the truth hidden within the labyrinthine tunnels. Each member of the trio brings their own motivations and fears to the journey. Sasha, the intrepid explorer, seeks the thrill of adventure and the adrenaline rush of the unknown. Anna, fueled by a lifelong fascination with legends and folklore, is determined to unravel the mysteries that shroud the Tulaikai tunnels. Meanwhile, Dmitri, the pragmatist of the group, approaches the expedition with a skeptical eye, relying on logic and reason to navigate the enigmatic landscape. Yet, as they trek deeper into the forest, the feeling of being watched intensifies, casting a pall over their journey. Shadows dance among the trees, and the air grows heavy with the weight of ancient secrets. Despite the unease creeping into their hearts, they press onward, drawn by a potent mix of curiosity and trepidation. With each step, the tension mounts, and the true nature of their quest begins to unfold. Little do they know, the path they tread is fraught with peril, and the shadows that lurk within the forest hold secrets far darker than they could have ever imagined. Sergei's tale sends shivers down the protagonist's spine as he recounts a chilling story of deranged hunters lurking in the woods. The vivid description of their madness and the eerie atmosphere they bring to the forest fills the protagonist with a sense of foreboding, heightening his senses and keeping him on edge. As dusk settles over the forest, a haunting sound pierces the stillness, the unmistakable wail of a child. The protagonist freezes, his heart pounding in his chest, as he strains to locate the source of the plaintive cry. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs sends a jolt of adrenaline coursing through his veins, his mind racing with thoughts of what horrors might lurk in the shadows. With cautious steps, he follows the sound deeper into the woods, each footfall echoing in the silence. The cry grows louder, more desperate, tugging at his heartstrings with its haunting melody. Finally, he reaches the source, a small clearing bathed in moonlight, where a lone fox sits, its mournful howls echoing through the night. Relief washes over the protagonist as he realizes the innocuous nature of the sound, yet the encounter leaves him unsettled. The juxtaposition of fear and reassurance lingers in the air, a reminder of the delicate balance between reality and imagination in the depths of the forest. Though the mystery of the crying child is solved, the memory of Sergei's tale lingers like a shadow, casting doubt on the safety of their surroundings. With newfound vigilance, the protagonist continues his journey through the darkened woods, knowing that the true dangers may still lie ahead. With his acute sense of hearing, the main character becomes attuned to the faintest whispers of the forest, a skill honed by years spent traversing its depths. As the cry of the fox echoes through the trees, it strikes a chord within him, igniting a curiosity that refuses to be ignored. Despite the skepticism of his companions, who urge him to press onward, the protagonist is compelled to investigate the source of the sound. With each step, his senses are heightened, every rustle of leaves and hoot of an owl magnified in his mind. The forest seems to hold its breath as he delves deeper, his ears finely tuned to the slightest disturbance. The cry grows louder, more insistent, leading him ever closer to the heart of the mystery. As he reaches the clearing bathed in moonlight, the sound crescendos, enveloping him in its mournful melody. With bated breath, he scans the surroundings, his senses on high alert for any sign of danger. In that moment, as he stands on the precipice between reality and imagination, the main character's resolve is unyielding. With unwavering determination, he sets out to uncover the truth, guided by nothing but his keen sense of hearing and an unshakable belief in his instincts. For him, the pursuit of knowledge is a journey fraught with uncertainty, yet it is a path he must tread if he is to unlock the secrets hidden within the heart of the forest. With cautious steps, the protagonist ventures deeper into the forest, his senses finally attuned to the cries of distress that echo through the trees. Guided by the haunting melody of the fox's call, he follows the sound until he stumbles upon a clearing bathed in moonlight. There, amidst the tangled undergrowth, lies the source of the plaintive cries a fox ensnared in a cruel trap, its delicate paw caught in the unforgiving jaws. Without hesitation, the protagonist rushes to its aid, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. With steady hands, he carefully approaches the trapped creature, mindful of the danger it poses even in its distress. Drawing upon his knowledge of the forest and its inhabitants, he dons protective gloves to shield himself from the fox's instinctual defense mechanisms. Gently, he manipulates the mechanism of the trap, his movements precise and deliberate, as he works to release the fox from its metallic prison. With each turn of the lever, the tension in the air mounts, until finally, with a soft click, the jaws of the trap relinquish their hold. As the fox bounds free, its eyes alight with gratitude, the protagonist can't help but feel a swell of pride at his success. For him, this small act of kindness reaffirms his connection to the natural world, reminding him of the importance of compassion in a world fraught with peril. With a final glance at the retreating form of the fox, he breathes a sigh of relief, knowing that he has made a difference in the life of a creature in need. And as he watches it disappear into the shadows of the forest, he carries with him the satisfaction of knowing that, for one fleeting moment, he was able to be a hero. As the protagonist retraces his steps back to the trail, a sense of unease gnaws at him, like tendrils of fog creeping through the dense underbrush. Suddenly, amidst the dappled shadows, he catches sight of a figure, an old crone with a gnarled cane, her gaze fixed intently upon him. There's something unsettling about her presence, something that sets his pulse racing and sends shivers down his spine. He can't quite put his finger on it, but the way she regards him with unblinking eyes leaves him with a creeping sense of dread. What's most unsettling, however, is the fact that he can't see her face. It's obscured by the deep shadows of the forest, leaving only the vague outline of her silhouette etched against the gloom. Despite his growing trepidation, the protagonist steels himself and approaches the old woman, his footsteps slow and cautious on the forest floor. With each step, the tension in the air mounts, until finally he stands before her, a mere arm's length away. For a moment, neither of them speaks, the silence thick and heavy between them. Then, in a voice as ancient as the trees themselves, the old woman speaks, her words carrying an otherworldly weight. "Welcome, traveler," she says, her voice a raspy whisper that seems to echo through the trees. You tread upon sacred ground where the spirits of the forest dwell. Be wary, for not all who wander here emerge unscathed. The protagonist's heart skips a beat at her words, a chill running down his spine at the ominous warning. He opens his mouth to respond, but before he can utter a single word, the old woman vanishes into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a faint echo of her presence. Shaken to the core, the protagonist stands alone in the heart of the forest, the memory of the encounter lingering like a ghostly whisper in the stillness of the night. And as he continues on his journey, he can't shake the feeling that he's just crossed paths with something far beyond his understanding. Throughout this episode, an eerie aura of suspense and mystery pervades every scene, casting a shadow of unease over the protagonist's journey. From the chilling tale of the deranged hunters to the haunting cries echoing through the forest, each event serves to heighten the sense of impending danger and uncertainty. The narrative unfolds like a dark tapestry, woven with threads of foreboding and intrigue. The protagonist's acute hearing, attuned to the faintest sounds of distress, amplifies the tension as he ventures deeper into the unknown. The encounter with the trapped fox adds another layer of complexity to the atmosphere, blending elements of empathy and fear. As the protagonist frees the creature from its snare, there's a palpable sense of relief, tempered by the lingering awareness of lurking threats. Yet it's the meeting with the enigmatic old woman that truly sets the stage for the climax of apprehension. Her presence, shrouded in mystery and ambiguity, casts a long shadow over the protagonist's psyche, leaving him questioning the very nature of his reality. In the heart of the forest, surrounded by whispers of unseen forces and hidden perils, the protagonist finds himself teetering on the edge of a precipice, where the line between perception and illusion blurs into a murky abyss of uncertainty. And as he presses forward, guided by a mixture of curiosity and trepidation, he can't shake the feeling that he's being watched, that something sinister lurks just beyond the edge of his awareness, waiting to reveal itself in the darkness. As the protagonist emerges from the dense undergrowth, the forest suddenly seems to exhale a sigh of tension. There, standing amidst the dappled shadows, is the hunched figure of the old crone, her gnarled cane tapping rhythmically against the forest floor. Her eyes, obscured by the veil of twilight, fixate intently on the protagonist, as if peering into the depths of his soul. A shiver of apprehension courses through the protagonist's veins as he beholds this spectral presence, her silhouette framed against the fading light. The air grows thick with an unspoken menace, and an inexplicable sense of dread coils around his heart like a serpent in the underbrush. The old woman's gaze feels like a weight upon his very being, her scrutiny penetrating beyond the surface, delving into realms best left unexplored. Despite the distance between them, her presence looms large, casting a long shadow across the path ahead. With a mounting sense of unease, the protagonist's instincts scream at him to flee, to retreat to the safety of familiarity and companionship. Without a second thought, he turns on his heel, his footsteps echoing like thunder in the silence of the forest, as he races back towards the comforting embrace of his friends, leaving the enigmatic figure behind, a haunting specter lingering in the depths of his consciousness. As the protagonist hastens back to his companions, a sharp pain lances through his knee with every step, causing him to wince and grit his teeth in discomfort. The injury, a reminder of his vulnerability in the unforgiving wilderness, slows his pace and casts a shadow over his hurried retreat. Upon reaching the shores of the Black Lake, they are met with a sight that defies their expectations. Instead of the ominous, coal-black waters they anticipated, the lake's hue is revealed to be a product of the dark algae thriving beneath its surface. The revelation dispels the eerie aura that had surrounded the lake in their minds, replacing it with a more mundane, albeit still mysterious, explanation. The realization brings a mixture of relief and intrigue to the group as they ponder the natural phenomena that shape the landscape around them. Despite the reassurance of the lake's true nature, the sense of foreboding that hangs in the air refuses to dissipate entirely, reminding them that the wilderness holds many secrets yet to be uncovered. With a renewed sense of caution, they press onward, their curiosity driving them deeper into the heart of the unknown. Left alone in the camp to nurse his injured knee, the protagonist feels an acute sense of isolation. His friends have ventured off to explore the surrounding area, leaving him to rest and recover. As he lies inside the tent, The throbbing pain in his knee is a constant reminder of his vulnerability. He tries to distract himself by listening to the sounds of the forest, but the usual rustling of leaves and chirping of birds seem to fade into an eerie silence. Gradually, a sense of unease creeps over him. He begins to notice subtle signs that suggest he might not be alone. The faint crunch of footsteps on fallen leaves, barely audible over the sound of his own breathing, sends a chill down his spine. He strains his ears, trying to determine if the noise is real or just a figment of his imagination. The tent, a flimsy barrier against the outside world, does little to make him feel secure. Shadows play tricks on his eyes, cast by the flickering light of the campfire outside. At first he dismisses the movement as the wind stirring the trees, but soon the shadows seem to take on a life of their own. Shapes flit just beyond the edges of his vision, darting in and out of the firelight, always disappearing before he can get a good look. His heart races as he recalls the encounter with the old woman earlier. Her piercing gaze and mysterious presence had unsettled him, and now, alone in the camp, he can't shake the feeling that she or something else is watching him. The rational part of his mind tells him that it's just his anxiety playing tricks, but the primal part, the part that senses danger, urges him to stay alert. Suddenly, a distinct sound breaks through the silence, a low, guttural growl, followed by the snapping of a twig. He sits up abruptly, wincing at the pain in his knee. Every nerve in his body is on high alert. He fumbles for a flashlight, his hands shaking slightly, and shines it toward the source of the noise. The beam cuts through the darkness, illuminating the dense forest, but reveals nothing out of the ordinary. Despite seeing nothing, the feeling of being watched intensifies. He scans the perimeter of the camp, the flashlight's beam darting from tree to tree. The silence is oppressive, amplifying every tiny sound. His mind races, conjuring images of wild animals, or worse, something supernatural lurking in the shadows. After what feels like an eternity, the footsteps and growls cease, leaving only the crackling of the campfire and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. The protagonist lies back down, his body tense and his heart pounding. Sleep seems impossible now, as every rustle and creak outside keeps him on edge. The isolation of the forest, coupled with the strange occurrences, makes the wait for his friend's return almost unbearable. As he lies in the tent, trying to shake off the unease, the protagonist suddenly hears a rustling sound near the entrance. His heart skips a beat, and he grabs the flashlight again, pointing it toward the noise. To his surprise, he sees the fox he had rescued from the trap earlier. The animal stands at the edge of the campfire's glow, its eyes reflecting the light, giving them an almost ethereal gleam. The fox doesn't seem afraid. Instead, it looks at him intently, as if trying to convey something. It takes a few tentative steps closer to the tent, then stops, its gaze unwavering. The protagonist sits up, wincing as a sharp pain shoots through his injured knee. He watches the fox, curious and cautious. After a moment, the fox turns and starts to walk away, pausing to look back at him, as if waiting for him to follow. The behavior strikes him as odd, almost too deliberate to be mere animal instinct. Despite the pain and the warnings echoing in his mind, he feels a compelling urge to follow the creature. Slowly, he gets to his feet, bracing himself against the throbbing in his knee. He grabs a jacket and slips on his shoes, then steps out of the tent, keeping the flashlight trained on the fox. It waits for him at the edge of the camp before moving forward again, leading him into the dense forest. The forest is eerily quiet, and each step he takes is accompanied by the crunch of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. The fox moves with an almost supernatural grace, gliding through the underbrush, as if it knows the way perfectly. The protagonist limps after it, his flashlight creating shifting shadows that add to the surreal atmosphere. Despite the pain, he pushes on, driven by a strange sense of purpose. The fox occasionally stops to make sure he's still following, its eyes glowing like twin beacons in the darkness. They travel deeper into the forest, farther from the safety of the camp and his friends. As they move, the protagonist starts to notice changes in his surroundings. The air grows colder, and an unnatural silence blankets the forest, making the rustling of the fox and his own labored breathing the only sounds. He begins to doubt the wisdom of his decision, but the fox's unwavering determination keeps him moving forward. After what feels like an eternity, they reach a small clearing. In the center stands a peculiar structure, half hidden by vines and moss. It looks ancient, almost as if it has been there for centuries, forgotten by time. The fox stops at the edge of the clearing and sits, watching him with those enigmatic eyes. The protagonist approaches the structure cautiously, his curiosity piqued despite the throbbing pain in his knee. As he steps closer, he realizes that the structure resembles an old, weathered shrine. Symbols he can't quite decipher are etched into the stone, and an air of mystery hangs around it. He turns to look at the fox, but it has vanished into the night, leaving him alone with the shrine. A sense of unease settles over him again, but now it's mixed with a strange fascination. He takes a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever he might find, and steps closer to the shrine, ready to uncover its secrets. The protagonist, compelled by the fox's silent beckoning, ventures deeper into the forest. Each step takes him further from the safety and familiarity of the camp, and with each passing minute, the forest around him grows denser and more foreboding. His thoughts become muddled, as if the deeper he goes, the more he loses his grip on reality. The rhythmic pain in his knee starts to fade into the background, overshadowed by a growing sense of disorientation. His flashlight begins to flicker, casting erratic shadows that dance around him, creating a surreal and eerie atmosphere. The fox, ever silent and graceful, leads him unerringly forward, but with each step, the protagonist's awareness of his surroundings diminishes. He no longer registers the rough terrain or the biting chill in the air. His entire focus narrows down to the glinting eyes of the fox ahead. It isn't until he stumbles over a gnarled root and falls to his knees that a semblance of clarity returns. He realizes with a jolt that he's plunged deep into the heart of the forest. Panic starts to creep in as he instinctively reaches for his compass and phone, only to find both missing. His heart races as the reality of his situation sinks in. He's lost, without any means of finding his way back. The fox stops and turns to look at him, its eyes now seeming more sinister than guiding. The protagonist feels a wave of dread wash over him. He finally grasps that the fox had been leading him astray, manipulating him to follow it deeper into the unknown. "Why did I follow it?" he mutters to himself, feeling the cold tendrils of fear coil around his chest. He scans his surroundings, but the forest is closed in around him, the path he had taken swallowed by the darkness and thick underbrush. In the silence that follows, the only sound is his own ragged breathing. The forest, once filled with the comforting noises of nocturnal life, now feels oppressive and ominous. The realization hits him hard. He is utterly alone. The fox, having completed its task, melts away into the shadows, leaving him stranded and bewildered. Desperate, he tries to retrace his steps, but each direction looks the same, the landmarks indistinguishable in the dim light. The sense of time slips away, minutes feeling like hours as he wanders aimlessly. His knee throbs with renewed intensity, but the pain barely registers against the backdrop of his growing panic. He forces himself to stop and take a deep breath, trying to regain some measure of composure. He tells himself, you can find a way out, but the forest seems to mock his resolve, its impenetrable darkness closing in from all sides. In this moment of isolation and fear, he realizes the gravity of his situation. The fox's manipulation has left him vulnerable, and the forest now feels like an inescapable labyrinth. His earlier curiosity and determination are replaced by a primal instinct to survive, to find his way back to his friends in the safety of the camp. Summoning what little strength he has left, he chooses a direction and starts walking, each step a battle against the encroaching despair. The forest, vast and indifferent, stretches endlessly before him, and he knows that finding his way back will be a test of his will and endurance. The protagonist, his breath ragged and heart pounding, stumbles through the dense forest, desperate to find his way back to the camp. Suddenly, a figure materializes out of the shadows. It is the old woman with the cane he had seen earlier. Her appearance is unexpected and unsettling, her eyes sharp and piercing in the dim light. "Are you lost, young man?" she asks, her voice gravelly but oddly soothing. The protagonist hesitates, his instincts screaming at him to stay away. But the pain in his knee and his disorientation override his caution. He nods, trying to mask his fear with a facade of composure. "I can help you," she continues, her gaze unwavering. My cabin isn't far from here. You need to rest and tend to that knee." He glances around, weighing his options. The forest seems to close in on him, and the prospect of wandering aimlessly until exhaustion or worse claims him is terrifying. With no better choice in sight, he nods again. "All right," he says, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Lead the way." The old woman moves with surprising agility for someone her age, her cane tapping rhythmically against the forest floor. The protagonist follows, each step sending sharp pains through his injured knee, but he forces himself to keep up. As they walk, the forest seems to grow quieter, the oppressive silence broken only by their footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. After what feels like an eternity, they reach a small clearing where a quaint wooden cabin stands. Smoke curls lazily from the chimney, and the warm glow of a fire flickers through the windows. The sight brings a wave of relief over him, a stark contrast to the ominous feelings the forest had evoked. "Come inside," the old woman says, opening the door and motioning for him to enter. He steps over the threshold, the warmth of the cabin enveloping him. The interior is cozy and cluttered with an array of strange artifacts and dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. The air is thick with the scent of burning wood and something else he can't quite identify. "Sit down," she instructs, pointing to a worn but comfortable-looking chair by the fire. "Let's have a look at that knee." He obeys, sinking into the chair with a groan of relief. She kneels beside him, examining his knee with surprisingly gentle hands. "You've done quite a number on this," she murmurs, shaking her head. "But nothing a bit of rest and some herbal poultice won't fix." She busies herself with gathering supplies, moving with a purposeful grace that puts him somewhat at ease. Despite his initial wariness, her demeanor is comforting, and he finds himself beginning to relax. As she applies a cool, fragrant poultice to his knee, the pain begins to ebb away, replaced by a soothing numbness. "Thank you," he says, his voice more steady now. "I was really lost out there." She smiles, a mysterious glint in her eyes. "The forest can be a treacherous place, especially at night. It's fortunate that I found you when I did." He nods, still wary but grateful for her help. As she finishes bandaging his knee, he can't help but wonder about the strange circumstances that brought him here. Who is this woman, and why does she live alone in such a remote part of the forest? But for now, he is simply glad to be safe, at least for the moment. The old woman hands him a steaming cup of tea, and he sips it gratefully, the warmth spreading through his body. His eyelids grow heavy, and despite his best efforts to stay alert, he finds himself drifting off to sleep, the flickering firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. As he slips into unconsciousness, a final thought flits through his mind. Did he really have a choice in following her? Or was this another manipulation by the forces that seem to control this strange forest? The old woman leads the protagonist through the forest, her cane tapping rhythmically against the uneven ground. As they walk, the trees thin out, revealing a clearing. In the middle of this clearing stands a small, dilapidated house. At first glance, it appears weathered and unremarkable, its wooden exterior showing signs of age and neglect. However, something about it tugs at a distant memory in the protagonist's mind. "Come inside," the old woman says, pushing open the creaky door. The hinges groan in protest, and she gestures for him to enter. Stepping over the threshold, the protagonist is struck by an overwhelming sense of familiarity. The interior is warm and inviting, lit by a crackling fire in the hearth. Despite the house's outward appearance, the inside feels spacious and strangely comforting. As he looks around, his eyes widen in disbelief. The furniture, the pictures on the walls, even the patterned rug beneath his feet, all are achingly familiar. This can't be," he mutters, his voice trembling. "I know this place." The old woman watches him with a knowing smile. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" His heart pounds as he realizes where he is. This house, though it should be impossible, is an exact replica of his grandparents' home, the one he had visited countless times during his childhood. Memories flood back, playing by the fireplace, the smell of his grandmother's cooking, his grandfather's deep, rumbling laughter. But that house was sold years ago after his grandparents passed away. How could this be? "This was my grandparents' house," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. but it was sold. The old woman nods, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. Sometimes, places we hold dear never truly leave us. They remain, waiting to be found again. The protagonist walks slowly through the house, his fingers trailing along familiar surfaces. Each room he enters is a portal to the past, filled with the echoes of long-gone days. The kitchen smells like fresh bread, just as it did when his grandmother baked. The living room is adorned with the same books and trinkets that lined the shelves when his grandfather was alive. He stops in front of a large, ornate mirror in the hallway. His reflection stares back at him, wide-eyed and disbelieving. The frame is intricately carved with familiar patterns, ones he used to trace with his fingers as a child. "How is this possible?" he asks, turning back to the old woman. She shrugs slightly, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. The forest works in strange ways. Sometimes it brings us back to where we belong, where we need to be. Despite the impossibility of it all, a sense of peace washes over him. He feels the weight of years lifting from his shoulders, replaced by a comforting nostalgia. The house, this haven of his childhood, feels like a sanctuary amidst the madness of the forest. As he sinks into an old, familiar armchair by the fire, he realizes that he doesn't need to understand the how or why of this place. For now, he is content to be here, in this echo of his past, where the memories of his grandparents' love and warmth still linger. The old woman, seeing his acceptance, nods approvingly and sets about tending to the fire. The protagonist closes his eyes, the crackling flames and the soft murmur of the old woman's movements soothing him. He breathes in deeply, inhaling the scent of home, and allows himself to drift into a peaceful sleep, wrapped in the embrace of his grandparents' legacy. The old woman's demeanor shifts subtly but unmistakably as she ushers the protagonist further into the house. Her movements, initially slow and careful, become more purposeful and assertive. She takes his arm, guiding him with surprising strength to a chair by the fire. The warmth of the flames is inviting, but a sense of unease grows within him. "Sit down," she commands, her voice firmer than before. "We need to take care of that knee." He lowers himself into the chair, the pain in his knee flaring sharply as he moves. She disappears into another room, her footsteps quick and confident, a stark contrast to the shuffling gait she displayed in the forest. When she returns, she carries a bowl filled with a steaming concoction that emits a pungent, herbal scent. "Here," she says, kneeling beside him with a grace that belies her age. She dips a cloth into the bowl, wrings it out, and begins to dab at his injured knee. The heat from the mixture seeps into his skin, and the sharp scent fills his nostrils, making his eyes water. As she works, he studies her more closely. The deep lines and wrinkles on her face seem less pronounced in the firelight, her hands steadier and more agile than he would have expected from someone so old. Her eyes, previously clouded and distant, are now clear and piercing, holding his gaze with an intensity that makes him uneasy. "This will help with the pain," she says, her tone brooking no argument. It's an old remedy, passed down through generations. He nods, too bewildered to respond. The warmth of the mixture does indeed seem to ease the pain, and he feels some of the tension leave his body. But the more he watches her, the more he questions the nature of her presence. There's something uncanny about her, something that defies the initial impression of frailty and age. "Who are you?" he asks suddenly, the question escaping before he can stop himself. She pauses, looking up at him with a hint of amusement in her eyes. "I'm just a caretaker of this place," she replies enigmatically, "someone who ensures that those who wander too far find their way back." Her answer only raises more questions, but the pain in his knee is subsiding, and the warmth of the fire is making him drowsy. He blinks heavily, fighting the urge to sleep. "You should rest," she advises, her voice soothing now, almost hypnotic. "The forest can be treacherous, especially for those who are injured." He feels his eyelids drooping, the combination of the warmth, the relief from the pain, and her calming presence proving too much to resist. As he drifts off, her face seems to blur and shift, the lines smoothing out, her features becoming younger, more defined. But before he can fully process this transformation, he succumbs to the comforting darkness of sleep. When he wakes, the house is quiet, the fire reduced to glowing embers. The pain in his knee is a dull throb now, manageable. He looks around, searching for the old woman, but she's nowhere to be seen. The bowl and cloth are gone, as if they never existed. Rising slowly, he tests his weight on his injured leg and finds it surprisingly stable. The house feels different now, less familiar, the shadows deeper and more ominous. He moves cautiously through the rooms, the unsettling sense that he is being watched growing with each step. He reaches the door and hesitates, glancing back one last time. The house, which had felt like a sanctuary, now seems like a trap. The old woman's words echo in his mind, someone who ensures that those who wander too far find their way back. Taking a deep breath, he steps outside, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the warmth of the house. He knows he must find his friends, but a part of him wonders if he will ever truly understand what he has experienced. As he limps back towards the path, the sense of being watched lingers, a reminder that the forest and its mysterious inhabitants are not done with him yet. As the protagonist sits in the chair, the old woman's soothing ministrations lull him into a state of calmness. The familiarity of the house around him evokes a rush of memories from his childhood. He recalls the summer days spent in this very room, the worn wooden floors, the scent of herbs drying by the window, and the old grandfather clock that had always seemed to tick just a bit slower than time itself. He looks around, noticing the little details that confirm his memories: the faded floral wallpaper, the creaky rocking chair by the hearth, and the collection of porcelain figurines on the mantelpiece. Each item tells a story, a fragment of his past that he had long forgotten but now returns to him with startling clarity. The old woman brings him a steaming cup of tea, the liquid a deep, vibrant green. It smells vaguely of mint and something else he can't quite place. As he sips, the warmth spreads through his body, easing the lingering tension in his muscles. "This tea will help you relax," she says, her voice carrying an almost maternal reassurance. He drinks gratefully, feeling the soothing effects almost immediately. She prepares a compress for his knee, her hands deft and sure, applying the poultice with practiced precision. The herbal mixture, cool and fragrant, brings immediate relief to the inflamed joint. As he watches her work, he begins to notice something strange. The lines on her face seem less pronounced, her skin smoother and more youthful. Her movements are fluid and strong, quite unlike the frail, stooped figure he had encountered in the forest. He blinks, shaking his head slightly, trying to dispel what he assumes is a trick of the light or his imagination playing games with him. "You remind me of someone," she says suddenly, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that sends a shiver down his spine. "Someone I knew long ago." He swallows, the tea suddenly feeling heavy in his stomach. "This house," he starts, his voice barely above a whisper. "It belonged to my grandparents. It feels like a lifetime since I was last here." She nods knowingly. Places like this hold memories. They shape us, and in turn we leave a part of ourselves behind. Her eyes soften. A strange mixture of recognition and something deeper, perhaps sorrow, flitting across her features. He's about to ask her how she came to be here, in his grandparents' house, when she rises and moves to stoke the fire. The flames cast a warm glow, illuminating her face and casting shadows that make her seem almost ageless. "You should rest now," she advises, her tone gentle but firm. "Your body needs to heal." He nods, feeling drowsiness creeping in once more. As he settles back into the chair, his eyelids growing heavy, he watches her through the haze of his fading consciousness. The transformation in her appearance is subtle but undeniable. She looks less like an old woman and more like someone in the prime of life. The room begins to blur as sleep takes hold, and his last conscious thought is of her eyes, those deep, knowing eyes that seem to hold the secrets of time itself. When he wakes, the fire is down to embers, and the room is cloaked in a comforting dimness. He feels remarkably better. His knee is no longer throbbing, and the fog of pain is lifted. He rises gingerly, testing his leg, and finds it surprisingly strong. The old woman is gone, the bowl of tea and the compress the only sign she had been there at all. He steps outside, the cool air a welcome contrast to the warm interior. The forest looms around him, and he feels a strange pull, as if the house and the old woman had been a dream. Yet the relief in his knee and the lingering taste of herbs on his tongue tell him it was real. As he heads back to find his friends, the sense of being watched returns. The forest is silent, but he can't shake the feeling that the old woman's presence lingers, watching over him. He wonders if he'll ever truly understand what happened, but for now, he's grateful for the unexpected care and the memories that surfaced in that familiar, mysterious house. As the protagonist sits in the comforting warmth of his grandparents' house, sipping the last dregs of the herbal tea, his mind drifts back to the moment he saved the fox from the trap. The memory is vivid: the sharp teeth of the steel jaws, the pained whimper of the fox, and the satisfaction he felt when he finally freed the creature. He remembers the peculiar feeling that had washed over him, as if someone or something had been guiding his actions. Now, in the flickering firelight, he realizes that the old woman had been there, watching from the shadows. "I saw you," he murmurs, more to himself than to anyone else. But the old woman, who had reappeared seemingly out of nowhere, nods in acknowledgement. "Yes," she says softly, her eyes reflecting the firelight with an almost supernatural glow. "I was there. I called you to help because I couldn't do it alone." He stares at her, the realization dawning slowly. "You called me? How?" She smiles enigmatically. The forest has its ways. Sometimes it needs a kind heart and willing hands. You have both. His mind reels. The forest, the fox, the strange compulsion, everything starts to make a twisted kind of sense. But as he opens his mouth to ask more, the old woman's expression hardens, and she leans closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your friends," she says, her tone filled with an undercurrent of distress, "they hurt me. They trample the delicate balance of this place, disturb its peace." He frowns, confusion mingling with concern. "What do you mean?" "They're just hiking. Exploring like I am." She shakes her head, her face contorted with an unspoken worry. Their presence is disruptive. The forest feels their intentions. Some come with respect, but others bring harm, knowingly or unknowingly. He feels a chill run down his spine. What can I do? The old woman's gaze sharpens, and she starts mixing herbs and roots with quick, precise movements. "I can protect you," she says, her voice taking on a more urgent edge. "I can prepare a blend that will keep you safe. But your friends, they might not be so lucky." He watches as she concocts the mixture, the aroma of crushed leaves and earth filling the air. "What do you mean? What will happen to them?" "The creatures of the forest are restless," she replies, without looking up from her work. "They will sense the disturbance. They will act to restore balance." A sense of dread coils in his stomach, but they don't mean any harm. They're my friends. The old woman finally looks up, her eyes piercing. "Intentions matter little here. Actions do. Stay here tonight. Let the forest settle. Warn your friends if you must, but they may not listen." He feels torn between loyalty to his friends and the unsettling truth in her words. He watches her finish the mixture, her hands steady and sure. Despite her strange warnings, there is a deep, inexplicable trust that he feels towards her. She hands him the compress, her touch lingering for a moment. "This will ease the pain," she says, her voice softening. "You have a kind heart, but be careful. Not everyone understands the ways of the forest." With that, she turns back to her work, leaving him with his thoughts. He steps outside, the cool night air a stark contrast to the warm, herb-scented interior. The forest around him is eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. He looks back at the house, the old woman's figure silhouetted against the firelight, and feels a deep unease. As he makes his way back to the campsite, every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig heightens his senses. The forest feels alive with unseen eyes, watching, waiting. He knows he must warn his friends, but he also feels the weight of the old woman's words. The balance of the forest is delicate, and they are outsiders in this ancient, sacred space. The journey back is painful, his knee throbbing despite the compress, but he pushes through, driven by the need to protect his friends and the mysterious pull of the forest. He wonders what awaits them all in the depths of this enchanted, treacherous wood. The old woman's demeanor had shifted subtly. Her once comforting presence now felt oppressive. Her insistence on treating his knee seemed less like genuine concern and more like a ploy to keep him there. When she handed him a basin of water and asked him to empty it outside. A deep sense of unease settled in his gut. The air inside the house felt stifling, and every instinct screamed at him to leave. Clutching the basin, he made his way to the door, each step feeling like a weight lifting from his shoulders. The moment he crossed the threshold, he dropped the basin and bolted. The pain in his knee flared with every step, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins kept him moving. He didn't dare look back, the feeling of eyes boring into his back propelling him forward. The forest, which had seemed so menacing earlier, now felt like a sanctuary as he put distance between himself and the old woman's house. With every stride, the oppressive feeling lessened, replaced by the cold, clear air of the wilderness. His breaths came in ragged gasps, but he didn't stop until he could no longer see the flickering lights of the house. As he slowed his pace, allowing his knee a moment's reprieve, his mind drifted back to a memory from his childhood, one that he hadn't thought about in years. He remembered the old corridor in his grandparents' house, the same house he'd just fled from, now seemingly larger and more menacing. He had been no more than 7, exploring the nooks and crannies of the old home with his older brother. They had a dog, a loyal mutt, who followed them everywhere. One afternoon he had discovered a corridor smeared with blood. The sight had been so shocking that he'd fainted on the spot. When he came to, he found himself in the living room, his parents hovering over him with worried expressions. The blood, it turned out, was from their dog, who had injured itself on some broken glass. His brother, in a fit of panic, had tried to stop the bleeding but only made things worse, eventually locking the dog in the house, inadvertently trapping it in a space where it smeared its blood everywhere. His parents had been furious, punishing his brother severely. His brother had always been resentful after that, blaming him for the incident and the subsequent punishment. The memory was painful, a reminder of the fractured relationship that never fully healed. He could still see his brother's eyes, filled with a mixture of guilt and anger. As he pushed through the underbrush, the memory faded, replaced by the immediate concern of finding his friends and warning them. The forest around him was alive with the sounds of night, but the oppressive sense of being watched had returned. He couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still following him. The journey back to the camp was a blur of pain and determination. Each step was a battle against the throbbing in his knee, but he had to keep moving. He had to warn his friends about the old woman and the strange occurrences. The forest was not safe, and neither were they. Standing alone in the dark forest, the hero's mind reeled from the series of unnerving events. His knee throbbed painfully, each pulse a reminder of his vulnerability. The towering trees around him seemed to close in, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. He felt a dull numbness settle over him, a sense of helplessness that he hadn't experienced since he was a child. Memories of his childhood trauma resurfaced, the blood-smeared corridor and the ensuing chaos playing out vividly in his mind. The oppressive silence of the forest pressed down on him. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig sent shivers down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight, watching and waiting. The fear gnawed at him, a primal terror that rooted him to the spot. His thoughts were a tangled mess of panic and desperation. He knew he had to move, to find his friends, but his body refused to cooperate, paralyzed by the overwhelming sense of danger. Just as he was about to succumb to despair, he heard a voice. At first he thought it was his mind playing tricks on him, but the voice grew clearer, more insistent. It was a familiar voice, one that he hadn't heard in years. He turned slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hey, it's okay. I've got you," said Sergei, his brother, stepping out from the shadows. His presence was a surreal mix of comfort and confusion. Sergei reached out, helping him to his feet with a firm grip. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he added, his tone light but tinged with concern. The hero blinked, trying to process what he was seeing. "Sergei? What? How are you here?" His voice was shaky, the words barely escaping his lips. Sergei smiled, a reassuring, almost mystical smile. "It's a long story, but right now we need to get you out of here." He glanced down at the injured knee. "Does it still hurt?" The hero instinctively reached for his knee, expecting the sharp pain to flare up. But to his astonishment, the pain had lessened significantly. It's better," he said, disbelief coloring his voice. Good, Sergei said, nodding. We need to move quickly. There are things in these woods that are best avoided. He began leading the way, his movements confident and unhesitant. As they walked, the hero's mind raced. How had Sergei found him? And why now, after all these years of estrangement? The forest seemed less menacing with Sergei by his side, but the questions gnawed at him. He felt a strange mix of relief and suspicion, unsure if he was still dreaming or if this was another trick of the forest. Sergei, what's happening? Why are you here? He asked, his voice steadying with each step. Sergei glanced back, his expression serious. I'll explain everything soon. Right now, we need to focus on getting back to the camp. There's something you need to know, something important about this place and why I'm here. His words were cryptic, adding to the mystery and urgency of the situation. The hero nodded, deciding to trust his brother for now. Despite their troubled past, Sergei's presence brought a glimmer of hope. They moved through the forest together, the sense of danger still lurking, but now overshadowed by the reunion with his brother and the promise of answers. As Sergei inquired about his knee, the hero realized something extraordinary. The pain was gone. He flexed his leg experimentally, marveling at how freely it moved, considering the agony he had endured mere moments ago. Accepting the flashlight from his brother, they pressed on through the dense foliage of the forest. The hero seized the opportunity to confide in Sergei about the strange encounters he had experienced, hoping for validation or at least understanding. However, to his dismay, Sergei dismissed his accounts as nothing more than the imaginings of a troubled mind, attributing them to the surreal landscape of dreams. The hero's heart sank as he realized that even his own brother doubted the reality of his experiences. Fear gnawed at him, a gnawing uncertainty that threatened to unravel his sanity. Despite the reassurance of his healed knee, the shadows of doubt loomed large in his mind as they ventured deeper into the unknown, illuminated only by the feeble beam of the flashlight. Arriving at the familiar house, where their grandmother resided, the hero turned around only to find his brother mysteriously absent. An unsettling chill crept up his spine as he scanned their surroundings, calling out for Sergei, but receiving no response. Despite the grandmother's beckoning from inside, he hesitated, torn between the instinctual need to find his brother and the uneasy feeling settling in the pit of his stomach. In the hazy corridors of memory, the hero revisited a childhood incident involving his grandfather's loyal shepherd dog. He recalled the moment when fear had gripped him upon witnessing the sight of the dog's bloodied wounds, a scene that had left an indelible mark on his psyche. Yet, paradoxically, it was this same dog that had kindled within him a profound affection for canines, leading him to spend countless hours in the dog's kennel, until it was eventually sealed shut after the dog's demise. The recollection of these memories painted a vivid picture of the hero's complex relationship with fear and affection, weaving a tapestry of emotions that echoed through the corridors of time. Returning to the house, the hero is greeted by his grandmother, her presence offering a semblance of comfort amidst the mounting uncertainty. She extends a hand of assistance, her eyes holding a glimmer of understanding as she assures him of having seen his brother. With a tone of solemn conviction, the grandmother asserts her ability to aid the hero. However, her offer comes with a peculiar condition: he must become her apprentice in the defense against the abomination lurking in the woods. She speaks of a darkness that dwells within the forest, hinting at malevolent forces that demand vigilance and protection. This enigmatic proposition sets the stage for a pact woven between familial ties and the mysteries of the surrounding wilderness, casting the hero into an unforeseen alliance with his grandmother against an unseen threat. Grandmother's voice carries a weight of ancient wisdom as she unravels tales of the elusive beings that inhabit the depths of the forest. She speaks of entities capable of assuming myriad forms, their elusive nature veiled in the shroud of the wilderness. To the hero's human eyes, these creatures remain unseen, their presence hinted at only by the subtlest of disturbances in the natural world. With a gaze that pierces the veil between reality and myth, the grandmother extends an invitation for the hero to linger within the forest's embrace. She promises him tutelage in the ways of the woods, suggesting that hidden knowledge awaits those who are willing to delve into its depths. Her words carry an assurance that his friends will find solace once they depart the caverns, their fates intertwined with the enigmatic forces that dwell amidst the trees. This proposition hangs in the air, pregnant with the weight of possibility and the allure of the unknown, beckoning the hero to venture deeper into the mysteries of the forest. With a heavy heart, but a resolute spirit, the hero makes a solemn decision to sacrifice his own freedom in exchange for the salvation of his brother and friends, even if it means embracing what may seem like madness. Standing at the precipice of a choice fraught with uncertainty, he bids a poignant farewell to his brother, knowing that their paths diverge at this pivotal moment. As the veil of twilight descends upon the forest, casting shadows that dance with whispers of ancient secrets, the hero sets foot on a path of no return. With each step into the heart of the wilderness, he relinquishes the familiarity of his former life, guided by a flicker of hope and the echo of his loved ones' voices. Though uncertainty cloaks his future like a shroud, the hero's resolve remains unyielding. He ventures forth into the enigmatic depths of the forest, a solitary figure against the backdrop of a world teeming with mysteries yet to be unraveled. And as the curtain falls on this chapter of his journey, the hero's fate intertwines with the boundless expanse of the unknown, forever etched in the annals of tales whispered amidst the rustling leaves.